So let's talk about narcissistic death dangling, and specifically around wills, trusts, estates, and narcissistic parents and family members. So, folks, these days with people living longer and the cost of caring for people who are getting older in place and later in life care skyrocketing, fewer and fewer people are getting anything left to them by their parents or grandparents other than debt or some bits and pieces. But that said, my guess is that there are plenty of folks out there who either have enough money to pay for all that and still have some left over, or may pass before any of that becomes an issue. And some folks just have a lot of money. And since narcissistic people, on average, tend to have more money, the odds of a well-resourced parent or parents being narcissistic, frankly, are higher. Narcissistic people use their someday coming deaths as a forever dangling manipulation, whether or not they have money. There is a lot of, someday I'm going to die and you will regret not doing this or that for me, or for treating me a certain way, etc., etc. And sadly, these manipulations can work quite well because so many people carry that fear of the possibility of even more regret once the narcissistic parent dies. And since a life with a narcissistic person if you have a narcissistic person in your life, is basically a study in regret, the idea that you can control some of the regret by doing more while the narcissistic person is still alive is a particularly lethal combination. Now, many people with narcissistic parents will say this sort of death dangling as a manipulation keeps them on the chain for a long time, sometimes a lifetime, running themselves ragged to somehow avoid this potential downstream regret. But it becomes a whole different level of games when it comes to things like trusts and wills and estates, especially if there's money or real estate or other meaningful assets of that nature involved. And this dance will get ugly very quickly when narcissistic people are involved. First, you may have a narcissistic parent who will use wills and trusts as a way of manipulating you, especially if you make a choice to do something like distance or disengage from the family system, or if you even speak out against it. Something like, well, I suppose if you do want to move away, there's little need for me to include you in terms of who I leave the house to, that kind of thing. They may also dangle other little bits. Oh gosh, you're so irritated with me all the time. Why would you ever want to hold on to a piece of my jewelry after I've gone? Folks, this is hard to hear, but your sanity really can't have a price put on it. And the fear that people sometimes have, if I disconnect from this family, I will lose money, or I won't get money that is rightfully mine, etc., etc. First of all, any person, frankly, even a narcissistic parent, doesn't have an obligation to leave anything to anyone. They want to leave it to a cat shelter. That's their call, right? But getting caught in the you can't win dance of them saying, oh, you don't want to come home from the holidays. I get that, but I was going to meet with the attorney to talk about the will anyhow. Or you're moving away. I guess I'll switch the will. Or you're marrying this person I don't like. I don't want them to get my money, that kind of thing. And at the end of the day, you may give in to all of their demands and still find out that they may not have followed through on what you thought that they would. The boldest move of all, if these kinds of manipulations are happening to you, regardless of how much money is involved, is to make the choice that is good for your mental health. And I recognize that for some of you, that whatever bequest it is you're expecting may be necessary for you financially later in life, and you believe that knowing that the money is coming is what is good for your mental health. I know that every situation is different. Be clear on what works for you. Otherwise, the promise, though, of what is to come or could be taken can keep you prisoner for a long time. And that doesn't even account for the narcissistic or toxic behavior of other family members or potential beneficiaries. And this can include narcissistic siblings, narcissistic step-parents, or your narcissistic parent or parents' subsequent spouses, your aunts, your uncles, whomever it may be. Because then it is a two-way model with this other narcissistic family member, for example, a sibling, attempting to ingratiate and get in with the narcissistic parent or grandparent to get a larger piece of the pie or even the whole damned pie. And the narcissistic sibling, who was playing the narcissistic parent's ground game and being perfect supply and showing up all the time long enough to get what they feel entitled to. This death dangling, whether it is through wills or trust, or through the possibility of regret and guilt, or the sense that you owe them something, is not unusual with narcissistic parents or grandparents. And once again, the only way to win is to not play the game. But people can get lost, and I understand why, but people can get lost in loops of what's fair and what's just and what equitable division should look like. And it can feel galling to see a manipulative, toxic family member angling and potentially also getting the lion's share. People are living longer, as I said, and narcissistic people often take damned good care of their own health, with little regard for others, so they may even live longer. And they kind of insulate themselves from interpersonal stress because they're the cause of it. So if you're going to hang in there, hoping for what you believe is rightfully yours, you may waste a lot of your life, and it still may not work out the way you hoped. And if it's not money at stake, but just the sense that maybe you could do enough, just enough to stave off regret, folks, there's never enough. And no, there is no deathbed testimony where the narcissist tells you that you did enough. Sometimes the greatest justice is choosing the path that is the healthiest and the most self-preserving. I recognize that for some of you, we may be talking about a fair chunk of change, so it's hard to walk away. For others of you, not so much. But rather, some of you may be holding in there for the sense of what's right. The fact is, right goes out the window when it comes to narcissistic relationships. Sometimes the sense of autonomy and individuation that comes from not playing ball with a manipulative narcissist is so precious that it may simply outweigh whatever it is that the narcissistic person is threatening to withhold. And frankly, a lot of narcissistic people are so disorganized that they never do make the threatened call to the attorney to make the threatened change. Narcissistic relationships are all about power and control. And there are few things that are more powerful and controlling than money. As is the opportunity to stave off future regret. So as you go through these death-dangling situations, tread lightly. Thanks again.